Have you ever looked at the student's test and thought, they had this? Why did they miss the word problem? It often happens that when we strip away the numbers and just have the numbers, they do fine. But when we put them in a word problem and surround them by words, somehow something gets lost in translation. We start to wonder, is it motivation? Is it carelessness? But what if that's not really the issue? One of the things that we as teachers need to do often in our classrooms with our students is diagnose where the breakdown happens. What if motivation and carelessness aren't the problem? We often, as teachers, assume that either they don't understand the math or they didn't read carefully enough. But does that mindset actually help us? One of the things that I often tell my students is that I'm not their English teacher. I'm not worried about whether they can decode the words. I am worried whether they can apply the math to the situation. So my students know to ask me to read the question so that they can hear it orally. Sometimes that pausing when it's appropriate, or watching the punctuation, or noticing that certain words don't make sense unless you pause in a certain spot. That can make or break the understanding of a word problem. When we think that they just don't understand the math or that they need to read more carefully, our tendency is to assign more practice questions. And that doesn't actually solve the problem. Here's a thought. If more math fixed the problem, wouldn't it already be solved? Let's explore what students are doing instead. The moment that students see a word problem, they look for all of the numbers. And then as a system, we've trained them to look for certain words. And we've developed all sorts of acronyms and things for how to break apart a word problem so that it becomes a procedure. But the problem with that is that word problems aren't a procedure. Word problems are, by their very nature, an application of the math concept in that context. And the context shouldn't always be the same. Students often take these numbers and words and pull them together and try to guess at what operation that means. And this means that, and oh, we must be doing this. Well, we have two numbers. We must have to multiply them because we've been doing multiplication in class. Does it sound familiar? But our students need to be able to understand conceptually what each operation is, how it acts, what it does, and then take the context and figure out, based on what's happening in the context, what operation works for that. It shouldn't just be a guess. One thing to understand is that when students do this, it isn't laziness. We've conditioned them to do this. So now we have to untrain their brains so that they think before they solve the word problem. So the question becomes, what's the invisible step that's missing in all of this? Students are diving into the math, into the numbers, into the calculation before they understand the context or even know what's being asked, what they're supposed to find. The reason most students skip this step is because teachers do it automatically. We've had years of experience. We've had time to be able to live life experiences, context of word problems, and practice those procedures, which is where students are jumping to. Students need to be able to understand what the context is, what's actually happening, visualize it, understand what's key and what's not, and then understand what is the question asking them to find. We as teachers need to teach this step, this invisible step, explicitly to students. Let's discuss the reframing strategy that teachers can use right away. It's important in the classroom, even though as teachers we're strapped for time, that we move from the question of can you solve it to can you make sense of it? Can you understand what the context is telling you and is asking you at the end? One simple step is to delay introducing the numbers into the word problem. Another is requiring descriptions of what's happening. If a student can re-articulate in their own words what's happening in the word problem and what it means, that will have a huge effect on their ability to interpret and apply the math concept. This approach doesn't slow learning. It enables students to become really strong thinkers. It's a situation of short-term pain for long-term gain. Students become faster and more capable math thinkers when they've had practice. We all know that this is just the first step. And so the challenge for many is, how do we implement this intentionally and repeatedly? It's important for students that we have a framework for them to be able to follow to solve word problems. And teachers need a shared language so that we can support them. This is where my Think Before You Solve framework comes into play. It's about having one solid framework that applies to all content areas. If solving word problems has been an issue for your students, you need this workshop. At the end of January, we'll be getting together for an hour and a half, and we'll be going through the Think Before You Solve framework. You'll get loads of actionable content as well as the framework itself. I'm putting the link in the description below because you're not going to want to miss this workshop. Now that you know the basics of teaching students to solve word problems, you're going to want to go through why we don't go directly to formulas, why we use the context and understanding instead of specifically only giving formulas to solve problems. Click the video on the screen and we'll explore that right now.